Number 3 is from Deputy Catherine Martin, who wishes to discuss providing assistance to owners affected by building defects and their access to the Home Building Finance Ireland Fund. Deputy Catherine Martin, please.
Minister, this week many homeowners of defective buildings and management companies who are led down a path by the government in relation to securing loan funding for the remediation of latent defects caused by rogue developers during the boom years found that the path you set out led straight into a brick wall. The Home Building Finance Ireland scheme, which the Minister for Finance indicated in an answer to a parliamentary question in December, would be in a position to consider applications by apartment owners and management companies to undertake remedial works on latent defects from this month. Well, it turns out it is closed to assisting homeowners facing the appalling prospect of having to undertake work on their own coin just to make their homes safe. Further, in Department of Finance correspondence to a government minister from November of last year, it states, and I quote, "There is nothing contained in the HBFI legislation that would prevent such a funding application being considered," unquote. Well, it seems there is. I understand the HBFI is not able to imagine a situation where a remediation application would be funded due to the possibility of further estimated costs once remediation is commenced if further issues present, and the inability of most management companies to provide security beyond personal guarantees from apartment owners. So, there you are, Minister. Apartment owners have been led up a blind alley by government. So, first of all, Minister, what happened here? Did your government really not understand its own legislation well enough to honestly tell people affected by latent defects that there wasn't a snowball chance in hell that the HBFI fund would be of any use to them? Why would you direct them with this false hope? While apartment owners and management companies who are affected by this deserve an answer as to why the one direction you pointed out to them turned out to be a dead end, they also deserve a comprehensive and accurate answer as to what your government intends to do to assist them. I first raised this issue in the Dáil with then Taoiseach Enda Kenny more than 2 years ago. Since then, we've had a Green Party motion backed by the Dáil calling for the preparation and publication of options for the financing and carrying out of remedial works to defective housing units that will form the basis for a nationwide scheme enshrined in legislation for the orderly remediation of legacy defects in housing. Since then, we have had a cross-party Safe Houses report, which called for a redress scheme to assist homeowners with latent defects, as well as information and advice service for those affected by non-compliance and regulatory failure. The most straightforward part of the Safe Houses recommendations was the call to set up an advice centre service. Obviously, after the fiasco with your information or misinformation on HBFI, this is needed more than ever. Have you even looked at doing this? Does the government intend to conduct a review, as the Society of Chartered Surveyors Ireland has called for, to ascertain how widespread and serious the problem of defective bills across the country is, and if not, why not? You cannot accurately assess potential reliefs without a comprehensive picture of the problem. And lastly, do you intend, or have you already investigated the possibility of the provision of any sort of assistance for affected homeowners in the form of, and I would be grateful, Minister, if you could deal with your response to each of these possible assistances. So in the form of 1, a potential advice service or provision of accurate information for people dealing with defects. 2, some form of tax relief, particularly given that reliefs are currently given to builders, developers and a wide range of other activities, but something to help them, these homeowners, in the form of VAT relief on remediation works, income tax relief or property tax relief. 3, a low-interest state loan fund to assist those who cannot pay for remedial works. 4, a redress scheme for the orderly remediation of latent defects.
Apologies for that, I want to thank Deputy Martin for raising this issue. And again, at the outset, I want to acknowledge the distressing situation that some owners and residents have found themselves in through no fault of their own due to defective buildings. And I know that this is an ongoing issue we've had debated here, as Deputy Martin has said, for a long number of years as well. In general, building defects are matters of resolution between the contracting parties involved. In other words, the homeowner, the builder, the developer and or the respective insurer's structural guarantees or warranty scheme. While my department has overall responsibility for establishing and maintaining an effective regulatory framework for building standards and building control, it has no general statutory role in resolving defects in privately owned buildings, including dwellings, nor does it have a budget for such matters, and I know there has been calls for a fund to do that as well. It is not possible for the state to take on responsibility or liability for all legacy issues, nor would it send the right message to the industry regarding the responsibility for compliance. In this regard, it is incumbent on the parties responsible for poor workmanship and on the supply of defective materials to face up to their responsibilities and take appropriate action to provide remedies for the affected homeowners. The legislative position is very clear in terms of where responsibilities rest. Under the Building Control Act 1990-2014, primary responsibility for the compliance of works with the requirements of the building regulations rests with the owners, the designers and builders of buildings. Enforcement of the building regulations is a matter of the 31 local building and control authorities who have extensive powers of inspection and enforcement under the Acts and who are independent in the use of their statutory powers. In relation to fire safety, when a building is constructed and occupied, statutory responsibility for fire safety is assigned by Section 18(2) of the Fire Service Act 1981 to the person having control of the building. In multi-unit developments, the person having control is generally the owner management company. Under the Multi-Unit Development Act 2011, the owner management company must establish a scheme for annual service charges and a sinking fund for spending on refurbishment, improvement or maintenance of a non-recurring nature of the multi-unit development. It should be noted that in response to the building failures that have emerged over the last decade, my department has advanced a robust and focused building control reform agenda and will continue to ensure that these reforms continue to have an impact. And I know that doesn't solve it for the existing people, but certainly for any development since 2014, we're quite confident that the proper regulatory framework is there to prevent this happening again. The difficulty is, and the issues you're raising, is who can deal with the current problems from these buildings built in prior years. But in relation to the specific question you've asked, I know there's a number of questions, but number one question in relation to the Home Building Finance Ireland scheme. It was established under the Home Building Finance Act 2018 as a supply-based measure to help address the shortage of new housing, and falls were in the remit of my colleague Minister for Finance. The Minister has been very clear that the HBFI was established on a commercial basis and that its activities will comply with state aid rules. So any funding provided by HBFI will be backed by appropriate security and normal banking terms, and conditions will apply, and HBFI will not be in a position to offer cheap or subsidised credit. It's not a subsidised credit, it's at a cost-neutral approach. It is important to recognise that the funding of remediation works are complex and are often high-risk projects and pose significant issues for lenders in relation to access to appropriate security. So while HBFI will be open to considering all residential development construction-related activity, it is a responsibility of all applicants to ensure that their applications for funding are commercially viable and allow for HBFI to remain compliant with state aid rules. I am advised from the HBFI that only a small number of calls and emails have been received in relation to this type of funding to date, and that none of these inquiries have progressed to a full application at this time. And they're quite welcome to progress to a full application, but it has to be on a commercial basis. They have to be able to provide security, and so this type of lending probably won't suit the situation that you're outlining in relation to these various developments that need remedial work. So it's not that they're prohibited from doing it, and no one has misled anybody in that respect, but their application mightn't pass, a credit application, because of the necessity for commercial viability and also security of the loan as well.
Minister, with respect, these homeowners need more than an acknowledgement of their stress. And in relation to the Home Building Finance Ireland scheme, you talked about the Minister for Finance being very clear. Yes, he was very clear, because I have the quote: "There is nothing contained in the HBFI legislation that would prevent such a funding application being considered." And in the parliamentary question, I have it here: HBFI will be in a position to consider applications from apartment owners and management companies for such funding at that time, courtesy of Minister Paschal Donoghue. So the mixed messages here, it's cruel. Instead of giving them hope, you've given them a sense of hopelessness. You give them that hope and you took it all away. And I asked you, specifically, are you telling me, there was 4 issues there, possible ways you could assist them? You've done nothing. I'm doing this at the stage where I stand up, I presume a government minister presumes I'm going to ask about helping these homeowners. That's how often I've raised this. You've done nothing. Not even a phone line to help these people. Not a phone line when they're in need. They do not know who to turn to. It's abundantly clear that 2 years later, the government is intent on abandoning these homeowners. I got a letter today from a person whose family member has been unexpectedly hit by a bill of more than €16,000 to fix fire safety issues in their apartment building, along with a stern notice, and this is what they get: do not discuss this matter even with friends, because if the media get to know about the problem, your property will be rendered unsaleable. People are terrified. And to your shame as a government, you are thriving on their terror. You are depending on their terror because you know that they are afraid to speak out publicly because of the fear that not only do they have to pay for these defects, but that their property will be rendered unsaleable. So no political pressure for you, therefore no problem. And Minister, with respect, every single time I hear about the BCAR 2014 regulations, let's not talk about that anymore because it's of no help to these people. No help. This is pre-2014. So will you please accept as a fundamental matter of principle that this is it's not simply a private contract issue. For many of these homeowners, there is no recourse to builders and developers who are long since bust. And do you accept, please, Minister, listen, that this is a public safety issue? And the government simply cannot sit idly by. Are you waiting for a tragedy to occur? Will it take a death? Fire alarms are going off in these buildings and they think that's it, that the apartment complex is going to burn down. They're living in fear. You have to do something or show some sort of indication that you intend to do something.
Minister, please, to conclude on this matter.
Again, with respect to the Deputy, I had to focus my answer on the main question you submitted the debate for. And I know you have other questions you want to ask, and that's fine, but you've asked about probably 10 questions, and I don't have time to answer all that. I had to focus in on the charge you're making, that as a government we've misled people in relation to the funding model that will be provided on the HBFI, and that's not the case, because we were very clear on this, that the HBFI was always to be established as a commercial entity and in full compliance with state aid rules and full lending terms, and conditions were to be approved by the board of the HBFI in due course, and never any other impression was given. So that's your charge today, and I'm going to deal with that, because it's unfair to say we misled people. We didn't. We understand the difficulties people are going through. We've all had situations in our counties when we've worked with groups of people who have found themselves in very difficult circumstances because of rogue workmanship or poor workmanship at an earlier stage under previous governments, and we try to help when we possibly can. But don't try to accuse us of misleading anybody in relation to this fund. It was set up as a supply issue to help builders today address supply and build houses today as well. And again, to be very clear, the HBFI, people can make applications to it. Each application will be examined on its own merits and particular circumstances, and it's a matter for the HBFI to assess and, if thought appropriate, to issue a term sheet having regard to state aid rules and its commercial responsibilities. But bear in mind, like all lending, there has to be some security involved, and that's a difficulty here as well. In relation to the general approach then, the reason we refer to the changes we've made, because you repeatedly ask what we're doing as a government. Well, first of all, what we had to do as a government was to put in place changes that they couldn't happen again. Which, no, we put in place a system that I can stand here as a Minister in that department with full confidence that this system that prevents what's happened in the past and the situation you're raising won't happen again. And that's the difference we've made. And actually, if you ask the experts in the area from all over the world, they'll tell you the Irish system is one of the best, because self-certification does work, and even countries that didn't have self-certification are considering going back to it, because it has been proven over the last number of years that it is working and it is making a difference in relation to the quality of the building that's coming forward, and as a sector as well. But we're also working with the sector in terms of changing the culture as well to make sure work is done right in the first place. And I know you refer to calls for a fund to be set up, and Minister Murphy did address this here on Tuesday as well on the Dáil time too. And you know, to be very clear, it's not, you know, if there was a magic way to be able to intervene and help here without exposing to the state to an unquantifiable amount of money, because there's over 200,000 apartments out there. I know Murphy is very clear on this. If someone can come forward with a roadmap that we could intervene and help people here, that's something we would look at. But we have to be very, very careful here of the exposure that's set to the taxpayers as well.
Thank you very much.